The film begins in the deserts of Mongolia, the largest desert in East Asia. In the middle of this desert, a company arrives with plans to drill for oil. But their information turns out to be wrong. There is no oil there. So, they decide to return. A plane is sent to bring them back. The pilot of that plane is named Frank, and he's accompanied by a co-pilot. All the workers board the plane with their belongings, setting off toward the city of Beijing. Not long after takeoff, a powerful storm begins to form along their flight path. Seeing this, Frank's co-pilot says, "We should land the plane now and wait until the storm passes." But Frank ignores his advice. As a result, they fly straight into the terrifying storm. They try to make radio contact, but communication is impossible. Meanwhile, one of the engines fails, and Frank decides to make an emergency landing. However, he can't see anything ahead of him. As the plane descends, the tail hits a rock, causing the rear door to burst open. One of the workers falls out and dies. The plane skids across the desert sand for a long distance before stopping. When it finally comes to rest, they discover that 2 more workers have died. Now, they are stranded in the dangerous desert. Checking their supplies, they find they have enough food for about a month. One of them says, "I can walk out of this desert. I've done a lot of hiking and trekking before." But the others warn him that it's July, the hottest time of the year, and he won't survive the heat. They also remind him, "You don't even know the direction. You'll just end up walking in circles." Eventually, he understands and drops the idea. That night, as everyone sleeps, a violent sandstorm strikes. John Davis, one of the men, goes outside to use the toilet, but his foot hits a rock and he tumbles down a slope. With the storm raging, he can't see anything and loses his way. The next morning, when everyone wakes up, they discover that one of their companions is missing. They search the area, but there's no sign of him. Then, one of the women in the group goes to the pilot and asks, "Will anyone come to rescue us?" The pilot replies, "There's no guarantee of that." Hearing this, the woman breaks down a little. They are completely lost. She says, "Even if someone comes looking for us, they'll never find us." With that, nearly everyone loses hope. They begin to believe that no one will ever come to save them. In this desperate situation, 2 of them decide they'll try to walk out of the desert. But when they try to take some water with them, the pilot stops them. No one is taking any water. An argument breaks out, and in the struggle, the water spills onto the sand. At that moment, a man named Elliot speaks up, saying, "I have an idea. We can all survive." He explains, "I've been studying this plane for a few days. We can rebuild a new aircraft using its parts." It turns out, Elliot used to work for an aircraft manufacturing company. This gives everyone new hope, and they agree to help him. But at first, the pilot refuses. He says, "That's impossible." The next day, one of the group secretly wanders off. When the woman notices, she goes after him, but the pilot stops her and goes himself instead. He reaches the spot where their plane had originally crashed. There, he finds the body of the worker who had fallen out earlier, but the man's clothes are missing, and several empty bullet shells lie scattered nearby. Just then, he also finds the man who had tried to leave the desert earlier. The man says, "I came to get my watch from that body. He took it from me." But when they can't find the watch, they both realize they are not alone. Someone else is out there in the desert. They hurry back to the camp where the rest of the group is waiting. Now, the pilot finally agrees to join Elliot's plan. They begin the work of rebuilding the plane. Because of the scorching heat, they can't work during the day, so they work only at night. But things take a dangerous turn when a spark from the welding torch ignites the fuel they'd saved, and a huge explosion occurs. Fortunately, no one is killed, but almost all of their fuel is destroyed. Now, they have just enough left for a single takeoff attempt, so they decide to work during the daytime. Despite the unbearable heat, they refuse to give up. They keep building. As they near completion, attaching the wings becomes the most critical task. Their one and only chance at survival. They didn't have any cranes, so if the wing had fallen, they would never have been able to repair the plane again. Carefully, they began lowering the wing little by little, but suddenly, the rope, the cable, holding it, snapped. The wing slipped downward and struck the side of the plane with a loud crash. Everyone was stunned. Inside the plane, one of their friends had been working. His job was to attach the wing to the body. After the wing fell, he came out and said, "The work is done." Amazingly, The wing had fallen exactly into the right place, precisely where it needed to be. With that, the plane's structure was complete. Hope returned to everyone's hearts. They might actually be able to fly out of there. They rejoiced, danced with excitement, and began clearing the sand to build a makeshift runway so the plane could take off. But things weren't that simple. One day, a terrifying electrical storm swept through. Lightning flashed all around, and since there was fuel inside the wings, everyone ran to a safe distance. But Elliot didn't move. He wanted to make sure the plane stayed safe. Just as lightning was about to strike him, Frank sprinted forward and pulled him down, saving his life at the last second. If Elliot had died, no one else would have been able to finish building the plane. After this, they named their aircraft Phoenix, after the mythical Egyptian bird that is reborn from the flames of the desert, a creature believed to be extraordinarily powerful. But their challenges weren't over yet. Their water supply was running dangerously low. One night, they spotted some tents in the distance. People were sleeping there. Those men were arms smugglers who used the desert route to transport weapons. Frank said, "We need to ask them for water." Elliot disagreed, but Frank and a few others decided to go anyway. Frank and one of his friends hid behind a rock, ready to attack if things went wrong. They were armed. When they asked for water, one of the smugglers suddenly opened fire. Frank and his friend immediately fired back, killing several smugglers. But one managed to escape, wounded. Frank had the chance to shoot him, but he didn't. He didn't want to become a murderer. Then James noticed the wristwatch on one of the dead smugglers and was shocked. It was the same watch that had belonged to their companion who'd fallen from the plane. That meant these were the same smugglers who had already been in the area when the crash happened. They brought the injured smuggler back to the plane. Some of the group said, "Kill him," but Frank refused. In the middle of the argument, Elliot suddenly grabbed a gun and shot the smuggler dead. This caused a fierce fight between Frank and Elliot. Elliot shouted at him, "You were the pilot. It's your fault we're stuck here. Because of you, one of our men is dead. I told you not to go, but you did anyway." Hearing that, Frank's anger boiled over. He punched Elliot hard in the face. Now Elliot becomes furious. His pride is wounded. He shouts, "I'm done working on this plane. I've done everything there is to do. I'm doing the work of 10 men while the rest of you just sit around and rest." Kelly approaches him and says gently, "We can't finish this plane without you. We need you." Elliot replies, "I'll only start working again if everyone asks me to." So, one by one, everyone, even Frank, comes up to him and pleads. Frank says, "You're the real leader here. Please, help us finish this." Finally, Elliot agrees, and the whole group returns to work on the plane. One day, through their binoculars, they spot the smuggler who had escaped earlier. He's returned, this time with reinforcements. But they don't approach the camp, because they know the survivors now have their weapons. The smugglers realize the group's food and water are nearly gone, and they plan to attack once the survivors are too weak to fight back. Knowing this, everyone works even faster. At last, the plane is finished. Just then, Frank finds a magazine filled with models of small aircraft. That's when the truth comes out. Elliot had designed the Phoenix based on toy plane models. He used to build small remote-controlled aircraft, but had never in his life built a real, full-sized plane. Everyone is stunned and angry, especially Ian. Ian grabs a gun, points it at Elliot's head, and shouts, "You lied to us! This plane will never fly! You've never even built a real plane before." Elliot stays calm and says, "Yes, I built small remote-controlled planes, but they're much harder to balance than big ones. Trust me, this plane will fly." Frank steps forward and stops Ian. At that very moment, a powerful sandstorm hits. The fierce wind makes the Phoenix sway in the air, as if it's trying to lift off on its own. Everyone realizes the plane can really fly. The hope they had long lost suddenly returns, but the storm is so strong that the Phoenix becomes buried under layers of sand. When the storm passes, everyone is heartbroken. Frank says, "We built this plane with our own hands, and we'll fly it. We're getting out of here." Together, they pull the Phoenix out from the sand and drag it to firmer ground. They start the engine. It roars to life, but then stalls. They try again, and finally, the engine starts running. The The sound alerts the smugglers. They come charging in on horseback, weapons in hand. Everyone scrambles onto the plane. Some cling to the wings, others hang from the fuselage. Because there's no room inside, the Phoenix begins to roll forward as bullets fly from behind. But miraculously, no one is hit. As the runway nears its end, they think, "This is it, we're not going to make it." But in the very next moment, Phoenix leaps across a deep ravine and soars into the sky. Everyone screams with joy. After months of struggle, they've finally made it. They've escaped death, escaped that brutal desert, a place from which no one had ever returned alive. In the final scene, we see Elliot's photo on the cover of a magazine.